Anyway, I'm always grateful to have Jill here, and I'm never going to let her leave. She has to commit to do this every month. I'm going to shame you, Jill. So anyway, thank you, Jill, again. These are very interesting times, and I love this topic of women spies. I think we are all capable of one time or another having done that job, right? So anyway, thank you, Jill, so much. We're glad to have you. We look forward to having you every month.
Thank you, Victoria, as always. And I want to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to research female spies, because I have to tell you, I didn't know much about them. So I have chosen 4 that I think are particularly interesting to talk to you about today. So let me just share my screen. And these are the 4 that we're going to be talking about. And I know, I'm sure everybody's heard of Mata Hari, but I'm not sure about the other ones. So by way of introduction, I want to play this short video. And I hope you can hear it and see.
Entertainer/spy? There's a career combo you don't see every day. Spies work in the shadows, while entertainers seek the limelight. The following ladies excelled at both, putting their lives on the line and bringing new meaning to Triple Threat. It's the famous women you didn't know were secretly spies. Beginning in the 1960s, Julia Child was a world-famous chef, introducing Americans to French cuisine and cookbooks and on her TV shows. But before she appeared on screen, she was working behind the scenes at the Office of Strategic Services, a World War II-era spy agency that would eventually become the CIA. When Julia first applied to the military after getting fired from an advertising job, she was turned away for being too tall. She was 6'2", but the OSS accepted her application, her interviewer noting she made a good impression, pleasant, alert, capable, very tall. Julia wasn't the type of spy as we know them.
Yes.
You can't see the video.
Gadgets. She worked.
You can't see the video?
No.
Oh, that's not good. There is nothing I can do about that then. I'm sorry. So we'll have to forego that. That's a Zoom issue and they won't let me show it.
Can you screen share?
I am screen sharing. I am doing
You
that.
are screen sharing.
But you know, certain videos, they don't let you show. So it's a Zoom thing. Let me just look.
Try again.
It's a spy thing.
Oh, it's a spy thing. Okay, just a minute. Let me try something here. I'm sharing everything and I'm so sorry.
That's okay, Jill. You're correct. Some things are blocked.
It's from, you know, this comes from a history channel, and so Zoom will not allow us to do this.
We can listen to it.
And I can send it out to you, and you can watch it yourselves later, but I'm going to go ahead and I'll have to do something else. I'm so sorry. But thank you for letting me know. All right, that's okay. We will go right on into Elizabeth Van Leeuw. And some of you might not have heard of her. She was an abolitionist and a supporter of the Union from Richmond, Virginia, who spied for the United States government during the American Civil War. She was leading a network of more than a dozen white and African-American women and men. She relayed information on Confederate operations to Union generals and helped with the escape of Union prisoners of war being held in the Confederate capital. Van Leeuw actually worked with invisible ink and coded messages, and she has been called the most skilled, innovative, and successful of all Civil War spies. She would often pretend to be mentally ill to keep suspicion away from her. And because of this, she was called Crazy Bet. But after the war, her good mental health returned, and she served as postmaster of Virginia, Richmond, during the administration of US President Ulysses S. Grant, and he was one of the generals to whom she had once given information. Elizabeth was born on October 15, 1818 in Richmond to John Van Loo of Long Island and Eliza Baker of Philadelphia. And despite their northern roots, the Van Loos owned slaves. They lived in a huge mansion that was 2.5 stories high on Church Street, and they belonged to Richmond society. But after attending a Quaker school in Philadelphia, Elizabeth began to develop anti-slavery ideas, and following the death of her father, her mother freed some of the family slaves. When Virginia seceded in the spring of 1861, Van Loo did not become a Confederate patriot as most of their friends and family had. Instead, she became committed to find ways to undermine the Confederate Army. Early in the war, Elizabeth and a few other abolitionists, including John Minor Botts, F.W.E. Lohman, and William S. Rowley, banded together to form an underground network whose goal was to free Confederate prisoners in the Confederate prison and to free the Union prisoners who were held up in the prison. During the summer of 1861, Elizabeth and her mother visited the captured soldiers being held in Richmond prisons. And at first, they merely brought them food, but then their visits became tactical. The prisoners were a very important source of information, and the Libby prison, which housed over 1,000 Union officers and in desperate conditions, was located just 6 blocks from the Van Loo mansion. Elizabeth wasn't able to get into the prison, so instead she bribed the guards to have the prisoners transferred to hospitals where she could visit them. And in several cases, she passed along information to the inmates using a custard dish with a secret compartment in the bottom. In 1864, she became the head of a Richmond spy network that was managed by the Union General Benjamin F. Butler. And in this way, she helped 109 prisoners escape out of the Libby prison. On the morning of February 10th, 1864, the Confederate jailers at Richmond's Libby prison discovered that 109 prisoners had escaped during the night. Libby prison was a converted warehouse where over 1,000 Union officers were held, and the prisoners escaped through a tunnel that was dug through a wall in the prison cellar. It went for 50 feet. If you see it here going across, it was 50 feet across, and they had to be so careful because it could collapse at any moment. And then it came out in an adjacent road and emerged near a shed in a vacant lot. The success of the escape was due to a large part to Elizabeth. Her code name was Babcock. She was always meticulously careful. She tore important messages into pieces and transported them by multiple couriers and through various relay stations, including a small family farm south of the city. Messages were hidden in the soles of shoes and even in eggshells. Because she was an abolitionist, she was always suspect as a spy in Richmond. She turned this to her advantage by making people think her support of the Union was merely a symptom of her mental illness. She was nicknamed Crazy Bet, and she wandered Richmond in shabby clothes, muttering to herself or singing nonsense songs. Elizabeth did her best to seem like she was a loyal Confederate woman. She wanted people to think that a Southern lady would never spy for the Union. Elizabeth also trained a former Van Loo slave to become a spy for the North, and this was Mary Richards Bowser. Elizabeth arranged for Bowser to be educated in the North and sent as a missionary to Liberia. During the war, Mary Richards Bowser worked as a servant for Jefferson Davis's family in the Confederate White House, where she collected information and passed it on to Elizabeth and to other spies. And you can see her in this picture here. Elizabeth Van Loo continued her activity as a spy until the end of the war. And after Richmond fell, she nursed civilians, unconcerned whether they had supported the North or they supported the South. After the war, she became involved in Republican politics, and in 1869, Grant appointed her postmaster of Richmond, a position that she held his 2 terms. And what she did in this position is to modernize the city's postal system, and she employed a number of African Americans, which was a real first for the city of Richmond. She sponsored a library for African Americans that opened in Richmond in 1876, but then she was fired from her job as postmaster in 1877 because of her Republican politics and because she was a woman. In her later years, she supported African American rights and women's suffrage. After Reconstruction, she was considered a traitor and a pariah in Richmond. "No one will walk with me on the street," she wrote. "No one will go with me anywhere. And it grows worse and worse as the years roll on." She had spent her own family fortune on intelligence activities during the war, and then she tried to be reimbursed by the federal government, but got nothing. She also tried to get a government pension from her work at the post office, but that also failed. Neighborhood children were told that she was a witch. She died in poverty on September 25th, 1900, after an illness of several months. She was buried in Shockley Cemetery in Richmond. Friends of hers in Boston, including the family of Paul Revere and a soldier that she had assisted at the county jail in 1862, ended up paying for her funeral. The city of Richmond acquired and demolished her mansion, which was said to be haunted, soon after her death, and an elementary school was built in its place. And now there is a statue in Richmond commemorating her life. Elizabeth Van Loo was inducted into the Military Intelligence Hall of Fame in 1993. All right, I hope you can see this video.
At the corner of 4th and Bates.
She absolutely was ahead of the curve.
Behind an ancient brick wall. Just a few blocks from the heart of downtown Richmond. Right there, nestled among crumbling stones and time-worn tombs. You'll stumble across a bulky 2,000-pound chunk of Boston. An unusual monument marking the final resting place.
She was universally hated in the city.
Of one of the most significant but least known figures in American history.
This is a great story of a forgotten woman.
Elizabeth Van Loo, a woman who single-handedly changes the course of the country.
She defied gender, class, and race.
Her actions, though, make her arguably the most despised woman in Virginia.
She really put her life on the line.
In the years prior to the Civil War, the slave trade is flourishing in Richmond, a place where massive fortunes are gained, while entire families are broken up, sold at auction. Elizabeth Van Loo is born in 1818 into a wealthy slave-owning household. a woman of means, living in the finest mansion on Church Hill.
She was accepted into a society. She was definitely a part of Richmond's elite.
But the Quaker-educated Van Loo comes to abhor the institution of humans owning humans. So she secretly starts freeing her slaves following her father's passing 20 years before the Emancipation Proclamation.
For a white person to do all that she did really was incredible.
Historian Dr. Laurinette Lee says the decision sets the unmarried Van Loo on a crash course with most of her fellow Virginians.
She was seen as someone that was almost a threat to Southern society.
At the outset of the Civil War, many Richmonders who oppose seceding from the Union flee north, but not Van Loo.
She believes that the slaveholders who argue on behalf of secession are hysterical.
In fact, she does not sit idly by watching the blue and the gray create a river of red. She plays an active role while war rages around her. Van Loo starts spending her entire fortune buying, freeing, and educating countless slaves.
She felt Virginians had a special duty to save the Union.
The 43-year-old also frequents the notorious Libby prison, aiding Union officers starving and suffering in squalor. She's not just ferrying food and medicine. Van Loo helps countless prisoners escape, hiding them in her own home.
That would have been seen as treason.
But Van Loo's greatest contribution to the Union's war effort remains top secret. With the South in open rebellion, Van Loo wages her own covert war. Her friends, working as servants in the homes of Confederate leaders, stealthily gather military intelligence.
There were people who were being executed for treason against the Confederacy in Richmond.
Van Loo and her clandestine network of a dozen black and white operatives risk life and limb.
They lived daily with the threat of death.
But when she's Elizabeth Van Loo in public, she pretends to be a loyal Confederate.
Elizabeth Varyn, author of Southern Lady, Yankee Spy.
Confederates know that they're Unionists who have orchestrated this, but they can't get them.
Richmond tour guide Sandy Bergman says Van Loo smuggles coded messages written in invisible ink to Union generals bearing down on Richmond.
She hollowed out eggshells and put messages in them.
While neighbors scoff at her anti-slavery position, no one thinks the diminutive Van Loo is capable of orchestrating such an effective spy ring that would help the North win the war.
The sexism of Confederate officials blinded them to her agency. She was a middle-aged spinster, as far as they were concerned.
After the guns fall silent and while the nation binds its wounds, the veil of secrecy is ripped from Van Loo's espionage machine. Former General, now President Grant, commends Van Loo and names her Postmistress of Richmond, a plum position wielding a lot of power. She hires newly emancipated African Americans and women to fill top positions.
When we think about civil rights leaders, we've not really thought about Elizabeth Van Loo.
She was a surprise and a shock.
The Virginia Historical Society's Caroline Legro.
I think that Richmonders weren't ready for her. I think she was somebody who was too far outside of her time, and the city hated it.
Labeled a traitor to the lost cause, the firebrand is threatened and bullied, but not deterred.
It says a great deal about her that she remained true to her cause.
Neighbors shun the eccentric Van Loo like the plague, forever calling her Crazy Bet.
I think that you can certainly feel an element of sadness when you look at her life.
Over time, she loses her wealth helping the Union war effort and freeing slaves. Van Loo falls on hard times.
And the only people who stick by her are the African Americans of Richmond.
Upon her death in 1900, Van Loo is buried in an unmarked grave in Shockoe Hill Cemetery. No monument erected in her honor, and the once grand Van Loo mansion demolished.
She was not on the right side to be celebrated.
Years after her death, Van Loo's abolitionist friends in New England helped secure her legacy.
Sometimes you'll go out there and find flowers on her grave, and we don't have any idea who's putting them there.
They shipped the massive stone and bronze plaque to Richmond, a delivery that makes bold headlines.
As a grave marker, it's interesting mostly in its simplicity.
Historians say a century and a half after Van Loo wrote her chapter in history, it's about time her story emerges from the shadows.
I think history will be kind to her, long-term history will be kind to her, and maybe she can come back, and maybe she's one of these kind of forgotten heroes that we no longer forget.
As for her hefty shrine, some say it's a fitting tribute to the woman who was as unyielding as a boulder.
I would think.
Okay, that is Elizabeth Van Loo, quite a woman. And now I want to move on to Mata Hari. And I know we've all heard the name, but maybe we don't know everything about her. In the early hours of October 15, 1917, Mata Hari, one of the most famous spies in the 20th century, was shaken awake in her prison cell. It was time. She was given a pen, ink, paper, and envelopes, and Mata Hari was allowed to write 2 letters. She hastily scribbled the notes before putting on her black stockings, high heels, and a velvet cloak lined at the bottom with fur. "I am ready," she said. She was driven from her cell in the Saint-Lazare prison to an old fort on the outskirts of Paris. It was just past 5:30 a.m. when she faced her firing squad, 12 French officers with their rifles. They offered a white cloth to wear as a blindfold, but Mata Hari refused, saying, "Must I wear that?" And legend has it that as the officers drew their weapons, Mata Hari, 41, blew a kiss to her executioners, and then they fired. The seductive, glamorous, exotic dancer who maybe spied for the Germans during World War I and maybe caused the death of thousands of Allied soldiers, captured the imagination of people around the world. She is considered the most well-known female spy of all time. Mata Hari was born Margareta, I'm not sure how to say that, Gertrude Zell. If there's anybody who speaks German and can say that better, I'd like to hear it. She was born to a prosperous family in 1876, and they called her Gerta. When Margarita was a teenager, her father, a hat seller, lost his fortune and left the family. Then her mother died when Margareta was 15, and she was sent away to live with relatives. At 18, Margareta met and soon married Rudolph John MacLeod, an officer in the East Indies Army who was almost twice her age. The couple left for Indonesia, where they lived for 4 years in military garrisons. But the marriage was troubled from the beginning and very abusive. In one of her letters, Margareta wrote that MacLeod came close to murdering me with a bread knife. I owe my life to a chair that fell over, which gave me time to find the door and get help. They had 2 children. Her son, who died at the age of 2, and a daughter who also almost died. And both of them were poisoned by the nanny. It's lucky that the daughter lived. Margareta and MacLeod eventually returned to Holland and separated, but MacLeod refused to pay alimony to help Margareta raise her daughter, and Margareta went to Paris and left her daughter with her ex-husband because she couldn't support her. Without a husband or a career and no money, Margareta used her experiences in Indonesia to create a new persona, one who wore beautiful jewels, smelled of perfume, could speak in Malay, and danced seductively, and often wore few clothes. She made her dancing debut in a salon and became an instant success. When reporters and others interviewed her, she added to the mystique that surrounded her by spinning fantastic, totally made-up stories about her background, including being a Javanese princess and daughter of a baron. We're watching Inventing Anna right now on Netflix, and she was kind of like this, Mata Hari. She just made up a whole persona that had nothing to do with reality. To sound more exotic, she took the stage name Mata Hari, which is Malayan for Eye of the Day or the Sun. Margareta became famous. At the time, all things Oriental were in fashion in Paris, and her exotic looks added to her mystique. She danced at private salons and then at large theaters. She danced at ballets. She danced at operas. She was invited to large parties and traveled all over the world. She had many lovers, and often they were military men from various countries who were willing to provide her financial support in exchange for her company. And here she is at a racetrack with one of her admirers. But she was no longer a young, beautiful dancer when in 1916, she started to spy for France during World War I. She was actually 40 years old. She fell in love with a Russian captain, Vladimir Demazlov, who was sent to the front and became injured. She was so in love, she wanted to support him financially. So she accepted an offer to spy for France in mid-1916. France thought that her courtesan contacts would be of use to its intelligence operation. She began to meet with German contacts, but actually she provided the French with little useful information. And the thought is that she may have begun to work for Germany as a double agent. The French eventually intercepted a German cable that named a spy codenamed H-21, which they knew was a code name for Mata Hari. And this is one of the movies that have been made about her life. During World War I, her frequent traveling across international borders and her many different companions caused several countries to wonder if she was a spy or even a double agent. Many people who knew her say that she was sociable, but probably just not smart enough to be a double agent. But the French became convinced that she was a spy working for Germany, and they arrested her on February 13th, 1917. And she was accused of spying for Germany, causing the deaths of at least 50,000 soldiers. And she was put on trial in July 1917. After a short trial conducted in private in front of a military court, she was found guilty of spying for Germany and sentenced to death by firing squad. The French executed her on October 15th, 1917. And the notion that Mata Hari was an exotic dancer who used her powers of seduction to extract military secrets was false. She was years past her prime as a dancer by the time she agreed to spy for France and possibly for Germany. She maintained her innocence up until the time of her death. Greta Garbo portrayed her in the 1931 film Mata Hari, which was censored for its risque scenes. I'm going to show you a little bit of that.
joke is as good as that, I like to hear it. Or maybe it's too bad for me to hear.
No. Our poor friend Dubois here says that you are a spy.
I mean, at least my thoughts will always be with you.
No, you mustn't.
But you are so beautiful.
His Excellency Secretary, please.
Leave him out of this. He's innocent. You can't.
Hello, this is General Shubin speaking. I must speak to His Excellency at once.
I'm warning you. Don't do it.
Hello, Your Excellency. I'm coming to the embassy at once. I must speak to you on a most urgent matter.
Shubin, if you don't stop.
Hello, Excellency.
Shubin!
Okay, Mata Hari, and that is the censored movie.
Mata Hari is a name that almost everyone knows, and they think of a seductive spy. But who was she really? Mata Hari was an exotic dancer in the early part of the 20th century. She danced on all the greatest stages across Europe. She had invented herself. She was really a Dutch woman, but she was masquerading as someone who had trained in the temples of Java and was doing sacred dances. But to paraphrase her, with each veil that she dropped to share her sacred body, the audiences loved her more. Mata Hari had created such a strong brand for herself as this incredible seductive powerhouse. Then, when that was combined with espionage, it was incredible to the public. She became a target first for German spies. They thought she would make an excellent spy, that she could use her seductive powers to gain secrets from the French and other people of interest. Then the French asked her to spy. And this was appealing to her. She decided she really would spy for the French because she wanted to have a big financial payday and settle down with someone that she had finally fallen in love with. But the French did not make good on her payday, instead accusing her of being a German spy, and the French found her guilty. She was sentenced to be executed by firing squad. By all accounts, she met her end bravely. She was escorted to the field. She turned and blew a kiss to her lawyer and a priest, and she refused to be blindfolded, and she was executed by firing squad. Well, currently at the International Spy Museum, we have a bodice that is purported to be one of Mata Hari's own. It dates back to probably around 1905. Due to its age, the bustier cannot be currently exhibited. It's very fragile. The bustier is a significant memento of the seductive spy's provocative public persona. What it speaks to is how rich her legend was the decade after your death and 100 years later as well.
And that's from the International Spy Museum. Okay, so now I want to talk about a couple of World War II spies. And I have loved Germany so much. Those were the last words of Mildred Harnack before she was murdered by the blade of the guillotine. She had first been sentenced to 6 years of hard labor for treason and espionage, but then Hitler decided she needed to be made an example of, and he ordered her execution. She was the only American civilian to be executed under the direct order of Hitler. Mildred Elizabeth Fish was born in Milwaukee on September 16, 1902. She was the youngest of 4 children born to William and Georgina Fish. So you can see her on the left corner there in the carriage. She grew up on the west side of Milwaukee, which was called Sauerkraut Boulevard. It was lined by large houses, many built by German merchants. You can see they weren't mansions, but they were very nice homes. Although she wasn't German, Mildred learned how to read, write, and speak both German and English. She was known as Millie to her friends, and she attended Milwaukee High School of the Arts, and she dreamed of becoming a writer. But then her father died, and the family moved to Chevy Chase, Maryland. In her last year of high school, she played on both the basketball and baseball teams, served as editor of the school newspaper, and played the lead role in the class play of Princess Angelica in Thackeray's The Rose and the Ring. She graduated high school in 1919 and attended the University of Wisconsin. She wrote for the Wisconsin Literary Magazine and was described by her professor as a good poet, but a little on the radical side. And here she is in 1923 when she's 18, and here in 1924. Mildred graduated in 1925 with her bachelor's degree and stayed at the university to teach English and attend graduate school. She received her master's in 1926 and started teaching English at the university. There, she met her future husband and co-spy, Arvid Harnack, a Rockefeller scholar from Germany who was working on getting his second PhD. Arvid met Mildred when he went to the wrong building and ended up in her class. Mildred was considered the most beautiful young woman at the university campus. She was absolutely gorgeous, according to Sharon Blair Brysack, who's the author of Resisting Hitler, Mildred Harnack and the Red Orchestra. Well, he went up and introduced himself to her. He apologized for his faltering English, and she apologized that she didn't speak German very well. And he proposed that he study English with her and she studied German with him. And that was how their romance and collaboration began. On June 8th, 1926, Arvid wrote to his mother, "I am very happy I've gotten engaged. The whole thing is actually very curious because I can hardly speak English and Mildred speaks only a little German. But I made up my mind to ask her to marry me when I saw her for the second time. We got engaged yesterday, and on August 8th, they were married." Mildred hyphenated her name, an almost unheard of thing to do at the time, becoming Mildred Fish-Harnock. They moved to Germany, where Mildred worked on her doctorate, while Arvid worked for the German government. Mildred taught modern American literature at Berlin University, becoming one of the first Americans on the faculty where Albert Einstein was also teaching at the same time. 15 months later, the university fired her, saying that she was not Nazi enough. Mildred and her husband joined a small resistance group. Their group published an underground newsletter and gave economic information to the US and Soviet embassies in Berlin. They united more than 150 opponents of Nazism from very different backgrounds. There were students, artists, journalists, and civil servants, and many of these were women. They discussed political and artistic issues. They helped persecuted people and documented Nazi crimes of violence. They appealed to the public by distributing leaflets, and they also made contact with resistors in other parts of Germany. After Germany invaded Russia, the group transmitted military intelligence to Moscow by what was called radio concerts, prompting the Gestapo to call them the Red Orchestra. Mildred had been warned to come back to the safety of the United States, but she refused, saying she didn't care how dangerous it was. She had work to do and she wasn't going back. The group was discovered and arrested in September of 1942. Mildred was taken to Charlottenburg Women's Prison to await trial. Arvid was sentenced to death for high treason and espionage. He was executed in December 1942, hung by a 1-foot-long rope, and it was a method that the Nazis used to prolong the victim's agony. Mildred was not told of his death, and Arvid thought that she was going to serve out her prison term of 6 years. Mildred's trial came, and her family was warned by the prosecutor. You are warned not to do anything whatsoever in favor of this woman. She no longer belongs to you. At first, she was sentenced, like I said, to 6 years in prison, but Hitler ordered a new trial and demanded her death. And all the members of what was called the Red Orchestra were executed. She was only 40 when she died, and she could no longer stand, having been tortured and starved in prison. At 6:57 p.m., February 16th, 1943, she was strapped to a bench and guillotined. The CIA investigated surviving members of the resistance as communist spies. Mildred's name and story were mostly forgotten. In 1947, the University of Wisconsin in Madison recognized Mildred in its alumni magazine. She then came to the attention of Wisconsin Senator Joe McCarthy, who called for an investigation of her, and Mildred and Arvid were both written off as communists. But gradually, the true story emerged as documents and family members fought to clear their names. And here's a stamp that's actually a German stamp commemorating the two of them. Then in 1986, Mildred Fish-Harnock Day was established in Wisconsin, and it takes place every year now on her birthday, September 16th. In 2011, Wisconsin's Nazi resistance, the Mildred Fish-Harnock story, aired on Wisconsin Public Television. And this is a book that's also recently been written about her life, and it was on the bestseller list. This Rebecca Donner is the great niece of Harnock.
Mildred always felt like she was a Wisconsin girl. These people were the heart of the Wisconsin idea.
She wrote about the spirit of democracy.
When they moved to Berlin, she was a witness to book burnings, beatings in the street.
Mildred felt that the Nazis were like a bad dream and it was going to blow over.
They underestimated them. These were thugs.
They saw the brutality and they saw what happened to the Jews.
We're in a political emergency.
Mildred says, well, it's not a question of how dangerous it is. I've got work to do.
They knew the Gestapo was on their trail.
He was called Hitler's bloodhound.
People were very afraid.
It was too dangerous.
She could have left.
He wanted this American woman. Suddenly there was a knock on the door.
The rage drove a thirst for vengeance.
He didn't want any martyrs. He wanted her dead.
We can either hide from it or we can engage.
Mildred always felt like she was a Wisconsin girl. These people were the heart of the Wisconsin idea.
She wrote about the spirit of democracy.
When they moved
Germany, 1933. Hitler has seized
control of the country, but not all Germans are under his spell.
A lot of people felt the Nazis were like a bad dream and it was going to blow over.
Mildred Fish-Harnock is a Milwaukee native living under the Nazi regime.
Along with her German husband, Arvid, she chooses to fight back.
Mildred says, well, it's not a question of how dangerous it is. I've got work to do.
They enter into a world of espionage.
All right. One moment. Okay, we'll move on now to Virginia Hall. Can everybody see that? Yes. Okay. Virginia Hall is one of the most important American spies that people have never heard of. But now, more than 70 years after her wartime spying in France and almost 40 years after her death, Virginia Hall is becoming known. And now there's 3 books that have just come out about her, and 2 movies are in the works. Hall was born to a wealthy Baltimore family in 1906, and she was supposed to marry into wealth and lead a very comfortable life of privilege. But she wanted adventure instead of marriage. She liked to hunt, and once she went to school wearing a bracelet that was made of live snakes. Hall briefly attended Radcliffe and Barnard colleges, and then she went to study in Paris, and she decided that she wanted to become a diplomat. She wanted to be an ambassador, but the State Department wouldn't accept her. She kept applying, but women accounted for only 6 of the 1,500 US diplomats at the time. She finally got a clerical job at the US consulate in Turkey. But while she was hunting birds, she accidentally shot herself in the foot. Gangrene set in and her left leg was amputated right below the knee. After a long and painful recovery, she learned to use a clunky wooden leg that she named Cuthbert. It was a turning point for her. She felt that she had been given a second chance at life and she didn't want to waste it. When World War II broke out and Nazi Germany invaded France, she volunteered to drive an ambulance for the French. She was forced to flee France or be captured by the Nazis, and so she went to Britain. There she had a chance meeting with a spy who put her in contact with British intelligence. After very limited training, this one-legged American woman was among the first British spies sent to Nazi-occupied France in 1941. She pretended to be a reporter for the New York Post. Many members of her spy network were arrested or killed, but Hall was just a natural spy, and she was always one step ahead of the Gestapo. None of the Germans early on thought that a woman was capable of being a spy, and so that made it much easier for her. She operated in the French city of Lyon. She stayed at a convent and got the nuns to help her. She made friends with a female brothel owner and was given information that the French prostitutes got from the Germans. While her fellow resistance fighters were being tortured to death, shot in the streets, or impaled on meat hooks, she found her way through the countryside of occupied France with a Colt 45 and a full communication suite concealed in a very ordinary looking suitcase, looking for the next good spot to broadcast German operations plans to Allied command in London. She herself coordinated airdrops of weapons, cash, and reinforcements for French resistance agents. She provided them with safe houses and information. She recruited and trained guerrilla fighters. She blew up bridges. She derailed trains. She sabotaged German installations. She gathered intelligence on group positions, and she reported all the information back to Allied headquarters. Pretty soon, the Germans realized that they were looking for a limping lady. Virginia changed her appearance several times during the day. She could be 4 different women in an afternoon with 4 different code names. She became one of the most hunted spies. They finally sent the Gestapo's butcher of Lyon, Klaus Barbie, known for torturing and killing thousands, to France. Barbie ordered wanted posters of Hall that showed a drawing of her below the words, "The enemy's most dangerous spy. We must find and destroy her." Klaus Barbie appeared to be closing in on Hall around the end of 1942. She narrowly escaped to Spain by walking 3 days for 50 miles in heavy snow over the Pyrenees Mountains, and this on her wooden leg named Cuthbert. When Hall reached Spain, she was arrested because she didn't have an entrance stamp on her passport. She was released after 6 weeks, and she made her way back to Britain. She begged to return to France to continue spying, but the British refused, saying that it was much too dangerous for her. But at this time, the Americans were starting their own intelligence service, the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, and they wanted a presence in France. She knew that she could be discovered quickly there, so she got a makeup artist to teach her how to draw wrinkles on her face. She dyed her hair white, and she got a London dentist to grind down her beautiful white American teeth. So she looked like a milkmaid. She looked horrifying. Virginia went to France in 1944 and 1945, and she was more successful than ever. She called in airdrops for the resistance fighters who blew up bridges and sabotaged trains, set up safe houses, and rescued pilots. Moving through the French countryside with a sidearm and a radio concealed in a suitcase, she would set up in barns, attics, and safe houses to broadcast mission reports and intel back to London. These radio broadcasts were something that could be traced by the Gestapo. So after setting up and broadcasting, she had to immediately pack up and leave before the SS showed up to permanently shut down her operations. Because of her work, resistance fighters were able to reclaim villages before Allied troops advanced into France. Hall's network consisted of over 1,500 people, including a French-American soldier, Paul Goyot, who became her husband. After she came home from the war, she never talked about it. Both the British and the French recognized her contributions. President Harry Truman wanted to honor her at a public White House ceremony, but she declined, saying she wanted to remain undercover. She received the Distinguished Service Cross from the OSS, making her the only civilian woman to receive one in World War II. Many consider her America's greatest spy of World War II. She joined the newly formed CIA, which succeeded the OSS, and she worked there for 15 years. But she hated sitting at a desk. That was not her, and she missed adventure. She retired in 1966, and she moved to a farm outside of Baltimore. She died at the age of 78. If you want to learn more about her, as I said, there's books written about her. Here's 2, A Woman of No Importance and A Hall of Mirrors. Both of these I would recommend. What a woman she was. This is from a film made about her.
We're desperate for information about France. Churchill has asked us to create a secret army of spies.
This is a rudimentary operation.
Women will be more inconspicuous.
Make sure they're pretty.
For you or for the Germans? I don't believe we've met.
Virginia Hall.
We could set her up as a journalist.
Good Lord, Vera, she has a wooden leg.
Would you suspect this girl's a spy? Rumor has it you are the best wireless operator in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force.
Signaling is like music. There is a rhythm to it. I'm a pacifist, and they are teaching us to kill. They're training us to survive.
We need you as our first female field agent.
Okay, sir. Don't be fooled. Common folks are becoming collaborators.
Acquire information, build resistance,
Bon courage.
and set France ablaze.
If you have any doubts, tell me now.
This feels dangerous.
We're here now. Seen it through.
We've had no choice but to learn the hard way how to do this. Trial and a lot of error.
Come on, let's go.
Go now!
The Germans are locating our signals faster than anticipated.
We must keep trying.
Who is she? I'm going to ask one more time.
The Germans will stop at nothing till they find you.
I'm not giving up. We're not giving up.
Up!
You know, we are here only for a short time. But what we do while we're here changes the course of the future.
Hi there, movie.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that today and you learned something you didn't know about these female spies. I'm sorry I had trouble with some of the video. What I'd like to do is I'll send a link to the first video, which talks about 6 spies, and Victoria can send that out in an email. So I would love to hear your comments on these spies. Who did you think was especially brave or interesting?
All of them. I want to watch all the movies about them. I'm writing down movies.
Good. I'll make sure you get them all to see.
Great.
I think Virginia Hall's story was just wonderful. I had already read a book about her and how she called her wooden leg Cuthbert. And she went over the mountains with that leg that was so troublesome, and it hurt her, you know. I mean, she would fall sometimes, but my goodness, what a brave woman.
Yes.
And just so impressed. I love spy stories, so I couldn't wait to get on and hear these stories today.
Well, good. I'm so glad you could come today. Anybody else have a comment?
You know what happened to Mata Hari's daughter?
I don't. I have to look that up.
Yeah, I wondered about leaving it with that abusive husband, leaving that daughter. But I'm anxious to read A Woman of No Importance. A friend was just telling me about that book recently and how good it was. So I will definitely add that to that list. And now, oh, you'll send us the name of that last IFC movie.
I will. Sure. Yeah, the movies are all good. You can stream them all. They're available on Amazon Prime. And some of them are available on YouTube too.
And you know, Jill, this was your idea. And look at the turnout and the interest you have generated in this
Everybody
topic.
loves spies, right?
Yeah, really. I mean, what a great idea. So that just tells you this is an ongoing series, not necessarily spies, but every time you find more interesting, formidable women to share with us, we're all certainly open to learning more.
Well, I learned so much doing these classes. Like, I didn't realize there was a spy museum. I didn't know that. So
there's one in DC, I think. Is that where that one is?
That's
I've been to that one. years ago.
Yeah.
You've been there too, Sue?
Yeah. It was very good. Very good.
But I love this subject, and I can't wait to hear what you're going to do in the future.
Question here. Do we know what happened to Virginia Hall's husband? I think it said she married, and I think it showed that he was maybe tortured. He probably was killed.
Yes, I believe so.
And the woman from the Civil War, I think, was fascinated, really, that they absolutely, there she was being given recognition and respect for her work, and then no.
But that was so
all
clever
taken
of
away
her.
from her. What?
So clever of her to be crazy Bet. You know, she figured out how she could.
They accuse us of it anyway. You might as well pretend.
All right.
Well, before you sign off, two quick things. Don't forget, and Joy, I saw you, and Karen, we've got the St. Patrick's Day celebration live music, Irish music from the Hamilton School of Music, Thursday outside, along with shamrocks and treats. I would love to have all you guys show up. We need to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. But I also, again, want to thank Jill. She's such a gift to us. I really, really, really appreciate her research and her effort and her topics. It's just wonderful. It's just, yes. Thank you, Jill.
All right.
Thanks,
Jill.
Jill.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to research these spies.
Oh my goodness.
Very
interesting.
Look at the Countess of Staffordshire, and then there's a queen in Norway or someplace.
Oh, she was good. Yeah.
They both have similar lives, and there are a bunch of women who, you know, didn't like where they were, had affairs, their children were taken away, things like that. I'm watching a bunch of movies on TV, and when I look at the history part, they match.
Next time, Jill, next time.
Yeah, I will contact you, Victoria, so you could send them out to the link. Okay, thanks everybody.
And future
Bye-bye.
programs. Okay, thank you. Good to see everybody. So many great faces today. Thank you. Elaine Schwartz and Cynthia Schulman. Good to see you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good one.
Bye.
Have fun, Jill, with your daughter.